Yo, 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 what's good? What's good? So, I normally don't do these after the show kind of behind the scenes specials, but there are some other things that we really wanted to talk about that we just didn't get to in the show. And he definitely wanted to kind of really touch on the gun violence. That was one of the main reasons that we decided we were going to do this show. So, we wanted to go ahead and give y'all a quick, extra controversial conversation clip. What you got to say?
I just a lot of people have approached me about like how do you fix this problem, and I know there's been a lot of sound bites and stuff. And I often tell people like we have to have some kind of common sense approach. Obviously, going around collecting up everybody's guns, that's not gonna work.
Ain't gonna do it.
One of the things that I think, and people say, well, what can get bipartisan support? Bipartisan support for a red flag initiative, I know that just got passed fairly. I think that could get passed everywhere. What red flag means is somebody's family member has identified they're having a mental crisis.
Okay.
All right. Now I use me as an example. Hey, my daughter, my wife, or whatever calls down and says, listen, he's walking around talking to himself. He's got his clothes inside out. He's obviously not himself. He owns a lot of firearms. Like, we don't want him to have access to them. It ought to be a way where you can go in front of a probate judge or whatever and give law enforcement the ability to circumvent some of these things. One of the things that, and I haven't gotten into the Uvalda stuff a lot because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't like to touch issues when I'm emotional about
That I can definitely
I
respect
like to
that.
take, anytime children get slaughtered like that, we all gonna feel a way about that.
Exactly.
Right? And when we're in our feelings, we don't think correctly.
At all.
So I've tried to, but one of the things I've noticed about that is this boy displayed all kind of behavior beforehand that told people like, hey, he's a little off. And nobody addressed it, or there wasn't enough given to address it. So I think that's something that can get bipartisan support. The other thing is, man, like, there ought to be, I realize, so why do we have an age limit on handguns, but we don't have an age limit on long guns? It's kind of backwards. I understand in the 70s when they was doing that, or the 60s, why they did it, concealability, everything else. Nobody would have been able to foresee the rise of how AR-15s, AK-47s have been modified to basically turn into sub guns. So they're so transportable now. You know what I mean? When I was growing up, AK-47 was huge. Now they got this Draco. It's just things are different. Cars change, guns have changed as well, and I think that the laws have to change.
Yes.
Dealing with the guns. But one of the big inhibitors, for whatever reason, the NRA has just decided they're just going to be anti anything having to do with guns, and we have to ask ourselves the reason about that. I'm very intentional about talking about gun control because I understand that when we use that word gun control, the word gun control applied to African Americans in this country. It didn't always apply to everybody.
Nah.
The guns, the Saturday night special laws that were passed in the 60s and 70s were aimed at African Americans.
Like the Mulliford Act and stuff.
But yes, because these were guns that were cheap and affordable. And it was like, let's make sure that they don't have access to these guns. So a lot of this stuff is rooted in racism. Even going back to, you talked about this, the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment didn't pertain to me and you.
Not at all.
We were 3/5 of a person at that particular time, okay? But I also have to be cognizant of Rosewood, Black Wall Street, Greensboro, North Carolina, these race riots and race massacres that happened. Could they have been prevented if there was an armed populace, or there was some, I don't ever want to endorse a place where we take guns from everybody. And, because how does that play out?
Yeah, how does that help?
How does that, and there has to be some kind of common sense approach to that. The other thing is, man, I had one of the community activists in Middle Georgia call me and ask me, off the record, like, Spurgeon, what can we do about this? This is horrible, what's going on? I said, gun security. Nobody ever thinks about that. The vast majority of these guns that are getting used in these street crimes are stolen. They're not bought legally.
They hot.
All right, and how do people get access to them? They don't lock them up. They leave them laying in the car or something. It becomes, your gun starts becoming like a screwdriver or something. You know, your favorite screwdriver, you just leave it somewhere. That is a deadly weapon that needs to be secured and locked up. And that goes into, you know, you have a lot of kids that get killed behind this same thing, man. But that word gun control, we need to be very careful about how that's applied. I think that the two things, just to refocus the discussion again, the red flag stuff dealing with mental health and making sure that there needs to be, if it's 18 for long guns, it needs to be 21 for long guns, 21 for handguns as well. Understanding that the word long gun has changed. When I was growing up, a long gun was 30-06, you know, something that was long for real. Now we're calling these things long guns, but really they're glorified pistols. That's concealable. You can put them in a backpack.
Right.
You know, you can basically carry them, and that level of concealability makes them very dangerous as well. But you know, it's just common sense, man. If you can't, you know what I'm saying, do certain things at 21, you can't. Why would we be letting people buy a gun at 21 if they can't even buy a car?
Yeah, you can't. You can't even rent a car until you're 25.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, some of the things we do, and it's like, well, you know, I want Billy to be able to hunt. Well, give him, okay.
Give him bow and arrow.
Cool. I got a rifle. Me and him go hunting. I give him my rifle while we hunting, right? It's not his. I take it from him when I'm through. Yeah, we just make up reasons, man, like you said earlier, to glorify this gun culture and to continue to just down this road. We worship, in America, we worship at the altar of the gun, man.
Yes.
And it's got to stop.
It does, but you did say something that I'm glad you brought up real quickly, was the advocation of the Second Amendment, because traditionally, when we think about guns in black hands, it's been a narrative we haven't been able to tell ourselves.
No.
Right. So there's a group called Responsibly Armed. They do amazing work at gun safety and getting you comfortable with a gun, because first and foremost, holding a gun in your hand without any prior knowledge of it can be a very, very scary thing, especially once you recognize that this thing can propel a bullet that can take you out just by holding it. So you have to be comfortable. You have to be able to understand the gun safety, but gun security is something that definitely needs to be spoken about more. You know, especially with kids in the house, or with, you know, any kind of issue of just leaving the gun accessible to anybody else that can have it.
Unfortunately, man, I worked a lot of cases where we had people accidental shooting with children and stuff. And it's like, it defies common sense sometimes. And the touchy issue about that is, the mother is usually held responsible, but nobody wants to prosecute the mother. She just lost a child. You know, it is. So, you know.
Dang, I really didn't think about
that. Yeah,
and
it's tough, man. It's tough, but maybe if we did a lot more. I know that there's programs at elementary schools, man, just like fire safety programs, where you teach the kids about not messing with guns. And going home, funny story, my daughter came home from Shirley Hills Elementary School one day. They had a fire program. She came home with a little notepad, and I guess one around the fire department had talked to her, and she was like, "Dad, what's our safety plan?" I'm like, "What?"
No.
I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, I talked to Fireman Bob came today, and he was like, we need to have a safety plan, a rally point." And I'm like, "Well, wow, bud, like, okay." It made me, it shamed me as an adult, because here I am in the profession and not even thinking about this. So maybe that's an answer when I think a lot of times it's kind of taboo for us to talk about that stuff. But if we're gonna have this extensive gun culture that goes into, like you say, the whole popular culture, let's not even deal with hip hop, the Goodfellas, the Godfather.
Oh, gangsters have always been.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the cowboy movies. Like it's like we can't escape the fact that we glorify these things, we glorify these acts of violence. But let's just do some common sense stuff to try to fix it. And I'm not saying I agree with all that. Have I looked at the James Bond movie and got, oh, that's cool? But with anything else, our consciousness needs to evolve, and we start understanding, like, man, what is this influence on? I'm able to watch this movie and look at it even as a teenager, a child, and go, man, that man shot 20 people and didn't even have to write a report. Like, be for real. But you got some folk out there that watch this type of stuff, man, and they ingest this stuff, and they really go to believe in it. And I don't know. You know, it's tough in this country because you look at the history of this country, man. This country was built on guns and the threat of violence and mob violence and the feud, the family. I'm talking, you know, the family feud. You look at our laws, as far as self-defense laws and stuff. And I don't know about other countries, but I'm sure our self-defense laws are probably the most liberal in the whole world. You know, defense of habitation, defense of property. You know, Texas, somebody stealing your hubcap, you can shoot them. You know what I mean? And it's been like that forever. They're not. It's not gonna change. I really just think that if we see what the end game with this stuff is, what happened up in Buffalo, we can go on and on about Sandy Creek, all these other shootings, man. At some point, when are we gonna get tired of it? When are we gonna get tired of it? When are we gonna do something different?
That is really what seems to be the only pressing matter at this point. It's no longer talking about the problem. It's no longer even trying to debate about whether we can find solutions. We know that there's things that we need to try because we haven't tried anything.
We haven't done anything.
So if people are kind of upset, it's like, you guys keep proposing the same stuff. And we're like, that's because you haven't tried it yet. You kind of got to try it first to see if it doesn't work. Give us a shot at trying to change these things.
You know, we going back to Texas that had the bell tower shooting in like the 1950 or whenever that was, when that happened. You had somebody climb up in a tower and shoot 50 people. And it's like, each generation forgets. See, I have a good memory, and I try to put stuff, because people if you forget history, you're doing to repeat it.
Doomed.
And, you know, everybody says, oh, this school shooting stuff is a new phenomenon. Nah, bro, this stuff been going on since 1910, right? And it probably was going on before that. It's just that we're better able to document this stuff now. And it's like, at what point in the 300-year history of this country are we going to, at some point, say, hey, man, let's do better?
Let's do better. I don't know. But I appreciate that.
Hey, no problem, man. I appreciate you giving me time.
Nah, we definitely needed to cover that, because you're right. This gun violence situation, it's not going anywhere, and it's only getting worse exponentially quicker. And the only way that we can handle it is to actually start taking action.
And doing something.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, controversial conversation behind the scenes. Appreciate it.